Hello to all my fans and friends, I'm the Pyjama Critic, and ever since the last guy who did this job had a heart attack and I put on the pyjamas, I'm here in the slumber lounge talking about movies. It's that time of year once more. Winter solstice is upon us, and with that comes a host of holiday traditions. Well-known novelty records played on every radio station, decorations in town square, family coming together for a grand meal and party, maybe not this year, but usually. And of course, a Christmas family movie, always set in the festive season and often involving Christmas being under threat of not happening for some people and the quest to save it. Many of these movies, of course, feature another staple of the season, the jolly old bearded man, poster boy for Yule, Coca-Cola and type 2 diabetes. Often there is some sort of plot involving him getting kidnapped or otherwise rendered unable to do his job, but Disney decided to go in a different direction and introduce a brand new element to the tale. Sidestepping the usual villain trying to prevent solstice celebrations and Santa saving the day, they instead focused on how a man becomes Santa and how he feels about being given the job. So let's delve into the twist in the tale and take far too close a look at the Santa Claus.
Hey guys.
Released in 1994, directed by John Pasquin and starring Tim Allen, Wendy Crewson, Judge Reinhold and David Krumholtz, the film tells a story of a divorced father who takes on the role of Santa Claus, much to the delight of his son, but others aren't willing to believe him, so it rather turns his life upside down. We're introduced to this world at a rather swinging office party on Christmas Eve that turns out to be for a toy manufacturer celebrating a record-breaking year. Here we are introduced to Scott Calvin, played by Tim Allen. Apparently he's head of marketing and distribution, which is family movie speak for this guy has a high-paying job that takes up all his time, don't ask any more questions. He also has a colleague who is introduced as if she is Scott's equal, but she has one line here and then gets literally pushed to the side by Scott. We never see her again. As he heads home from the party, he reveals a lot more about himself. He's supposed to be spending Christmas Eve with his son, but seems to prefer staying at the party to get his honour, which he is perfectly happy to lie to his ex-wife about. Meanwhile, we get this montage of Christmasing in Chicago. They fly by fast, but all the children we see in this scene are faces we will see again later. As Scott finally arrives home to meet his son Charlie, played by Eric Lloyd, he is of course accompanied by his ex-wife Laura, played by Wendy Crewson, and her new husband Neil, played by Judge Reinhold. During this sequence, it is established that Charlie has developed a better relationship with his stepfather than with his birth father, mainly because Scott is apparently always too busy to be involved as a parent.
And who gave you permission to tell Charlie there's no Santa Claus? I think if we're going to destroy our son's illusions, I should be a part of it.
Yeah, but you're never around, are you, Scott?
Mini spoiler, but we only have Laura's word for that. After this initial moment where he's late to meet his son, we only ever see Scott being an active involved father. Anyway, one problem this has caused is Neil, being a pragmatic atheist psychiatrist, disapproves of the Santa Claus story and has discouraged Charlie from believing, much to the annoyance of Scott, who actively embraces the Christmas tradition of lying to your children so they don't know it's you, the parents, buying them presents, lest that encourage them to think you love them. Scott tries and fails to make Christmas dinner for Charlie because, as we all know, a single man attempting to cook or do any kind of parenting will always be a shambles. We do get this neat little reference though.
That is exactly why you want a high-quality fire extinguisher right in the kitchen.
Tim Allen was best known at the time for the long-running family comedy Home Improvement, where he played the host of a DIY show. A running gag there was Tim would cause accidents and smooth around it by claiming to be giving a demonstration of the safety equipment. At least in this movie, they do make it clear they don't want children to think that way of all men, just divorced dads.
You know, Neil's a real good cook.
Yeah, and you should see him walk on water.
Exemplified by this next scene where the two of them have dinner at a casual diner and are seated in a room reserved for single dads, being pathetic examples of their children. This does make for a slow opening, certainly when you know it is all setting a scene that gets instantly forgotten. So, back home, Scott puts Charlie to bed with a story, only for Charlie to ask some of the big questions.
But if Santa's so fat, how does he get down the chimneys?
He sucks it in like Grandpa.
But what about people who don't have fireplaces? How does he get into their house?
Charlie.
That's easy. Magic. If you're getting flustered over questions like that, how can you hope to handle the toughies like why does Santa give rich kids the best presents or what does Santa got against Muslim kids?
Let's go back to bed.
Somebody's on the roof.
Maybe it's Santa.
Not now, Charlie.
In comes the man himself, not showing the stealth I would expect from someone who usually makes it round the world unseen. Scott goes outside to investigate and...
Hey, you! What's that? Oh! Whoa, whoa!
In the original script, Scott took Santa for a burglar and unloaded a shotgun at him, but Disney were not going to have that, so instead we got this. It seems inconceivable that Santa would be so easily startled or that such a short fall would kill him, but it makes sense that this moment had to be got out of the way as quick as possible. When a movie features somebody taking over the role because Santa has died, you don't want to dwell on the death of the old one, and indeed this movie doesn't. The body waves goodbye, disappears, and nobody mentions him again, not even his colleagues at the North Pole, who must have been close. Scott finds Santa's card that instructs him to put on the red suit in this situation. It takes little encouragement from his son, but Scott does, and the reindeer take him to the next address on the route.
Well, we made good time. Now what do we do?
Spurred on by Charlie and the reindeer, Scott finishes the route, assuming himself to be in a very strange dream. We have to assume Chicago was all that was left, because they are then taken to the North Pole, where they meet the acquaintance of some less than helpful elves.
I mean, you guys. Or you girls. Who gives the orders? Who's your boss?
You are.
No. Who's the head elf?
You are.
Santa may be in charge, but he isn't an elf, so it should be clear what he means. All she had to say was, here's the Jewish elf in charge. He runs the workshop.
The other Santa disappeared, right?
Indeed, this is Bernard, played by David Krumholtz. A short-tempered, autocratic leader, he is, however, really good with kids. Maybe it's the stress of managing this operation, but Bernard is devoid of the Yuletide enthusiasm displayed by all the other elves, and has no patience or sympathy in explaining Scott as just being strong-armed into abandoning his life and career in Chicago, and now has to be the new Santa.
What does that mean?
It means you put on the suit, you're the big guy.
It's ridiculous. I never put on a suit just as a...
Try to understand this. It's Santa's job, but Santa fell off the roof. Your roof. You read the card, you put on the suit that clearly falls under the Santa Claus, and now you're Santa, okay?
As for why none of them seem to have any concern that their old bosses just died, well, we're told elves live to be well over 1,000, so over the centuries they have likely learned not to get too attached to humans, even St. Nick, as he'll be gone in a heartbeat by their standards. He's shown to his room.
Can I get you anything? The kitchen's always open.
What a stiff drink.
How about a glass of sherry? That's what we leave for him in Britain. In fact, most European countries leave out some sort of alcoholic drink. Not too wise, really, for someone who has to drive a sleigh around the world. He meets helpful maid elf Judy.
Go.
Oh, thanks.
My own recipe. Took me 1,200 years to get it right.
You know, I must say, you look pretty good for your age.
Thanks, but I'm seeing someone in wrapping.
So, apparently females of all species have this inbuilt reaction to assume every time a man says something nice he's trying to get off with them. She needs to get over herself. Scott is clearly just being polite. I would have said exactly the same thing, and I'm both happily married and gay. So Scott is encouraged to believe in the magic of Christmas, is laid to rest in the most luxurious bed ever devised, and wakes up back at home thinking it was all a dream. Charlie, however, knows it was real and wants to tell everybody about it, much to the annoyance of his mum and Neil, as they are sure Scott has been telling him fantasy stories. This then continues at the start of the next school term during a parents' career day, where, possibly to upstage the kid who brought in his astronaut father, Charlie tells the class all about Dad's new job, causing widespread mockery from his peers.
Look, I work for a toy company. I deliver toys all over the country. So in a way, I'm like Santa Claus.
Despite him clearly doing the exact opposite in his classroom, Laura, Neil and the school principal all blame Scott for encouraging Charlie's delusions. The second act of this movie takes place over the next 11 months, and it is often not clear just how long takes place between each scene, but we see a series of weekend visits where Scott continues to deny he is Santa Claus, but Charlie remains resolute that he is. Even in the face of this stepdad using all the arguments he can that Santa is not real.
What about the reindeer? Have you ever seen a reindeer fly?
Yes?
Well, I haven't.
Again, magic! What you see at the petting zoo doesn't apply when discussing a magical figure. You'll also notice Scott is getting progressively larger throughout this sequence. Laura and Neil continue to blame Scott for what they see as Charlie's delusions, and it becomes a threat to his visitation rights, so Scott tries to discourage Charlie from talking about it.
There's no reason why we have to tell anybody about the North Pole.
Why not?
I want to keep this secret. Will you do that? Please?
Okay, Dad.
Extremely bad lesson to teach any child. My show isn't meant for kids, but if any happen to see this, then take note. If an adult asks you to keep anything a secret from your parents, then tell your mum everything they did to you immediately. As the year goes on, Scott starts to notice the changes in himself as he grows a large Santa belly and beard, but it's not just his physical appearance that's changing. He has become naturally more jolly, charitable and child-friendly, as well as developing a terrible sugar addiction, all demonstrated at once in this work meeting, which, by the way, is the only time we see him at work, despite being told he was a workaholic earlier.
All we gotta do is develop a basic, simple, inexpensive toy that will nurture a child's creative thinking.
Calvin.
Here, try the brown one.
Luckily, he has an oblivious doctor who doesn't notice he's a medical anomaly and sends him to a museum. As Thanksgiving approaches, he starts to notice children are drawn to him and has a natural instinct for divining the good and bad behaved kids. Despite all this, the list arriving at his home and the magic reaching an unignorable level, he still seems somewhat in denial that he is indeed Santa now. Laura and Neil are still convinced Scott is doing all this just to encourage Charlie to believe in Santa, and they, as well as the family court, consider that to be such a crime that he loses all rights to see his son. Laura does consent to them having one final moment together on Thanksgiving, however.
Could you guys leave us alone for a minute? I mean, so I can say goodbye to him properly.
Hey, not your kid, not your decision. At first I thought this guy was just a stuffy prude lacking imagination, but now he's starting to come across as a real controlling jerk. He's been leading the way in getting Charlie away from his father, even when Mum was saying she didn't want that. That's really overstepping the boundaries of his role as a stepfather.
You saw a ball come to life.
You bet I did.
Well, if the movie has reached a holiday season, then we have reached the spoiler section of this review. I'm now going to talk about the ending of this movie, so if you haven't seen it yet and don't want to know how it ends, then skip to this time code. For the rest of you, on with December. Scott finally comes to accept that he is indeed Santa, and Bernard shows up to take them both away back to the North Pole. The next 4 weeks are rushed through in a montage of Santa preparing for the big night, including the elvish answer to Q from James Bond, showing them all their new safety measures and their pimped up sleigh. Meanwhile, Laura and Neil have gone to the police, who are now on the hunt for Santa Scott. As Christmas Eve arrives and Santa sets off on his rounds with Charlie, we get a few police are dumb gags that don't really land, as they are seen busting every mall Santa they can find, even though none of them look like Scott. Santa makes the delivery to Charlie's house, is arrested, but the elves are prepared for just this situation. The police officer sees the elves pick up Charlie. Lots of adults see Santa and the elves in this movie, so how do none of them believe Santa is real? In fact, they really should have noticed that presents are appearing under the tree that neither they nor any of their relatives bought. It's best not to think about the narrative around Santa this film presents.
We're looking for Santa Claus.
Go home, kids. Visiting hours are over.
We're not kids, and we're not visiting.
Still, elves bust Santa out of jail, he takes Charlie home, and we have this final meet-up with all the parents where they attempt to straighten things out when Charlie has to convince the others to believe.
I think it's a much better idea that you stay here with your mom and Neil.
Really?
But Dad...
This scene really is all over the place and actually quite hard to follow. First, Mum and Neil don't seem to mind Scott being there despite having had him arrested earlier. Then the mood of the moment is really inconsistent. Santa says he needs to get back to work and Charlie acts like he's disappearing forever. Then Laura and Neil just suddenly accept that he is Santa. Bernard shows up to remind Charlie that every other day and night of the year his dad will be able to visit him.
Great psychiatrist one day, kid.
No. I think I'm going to go into the family business.
Did Charlie just reveal an intention to kill his dad to get his job? So Santa gives Laura and Neil the presents they always wanted as children, and they agree to let Charlie accompany him on his rounds tonight. Merry Solstice to all, and to all a good night.
On our way.
Bye, Mom!
So that was the Santa Claus, and it certainly offers a new take on the Christmas movie. Divorce courts and custody battles are not usually the staple of these kinds of movies, and you have to admire any production that features the death of Santa at the start. The overall pacing could have been handled better, and some sequences seem very rushed, though you have to take into account the target audience. Children generally don't want a chance to take in and think about a scene. Sometimes I get the feeling that the overall story suffers from too much being left on the cutting room floor, and there are even individual scenes that give that impression. The performances are nothing special, but still fine. Tim Allen just gives us an extension of his character from Home Improvement, improvement. But hey, I liked him in that show, so I like him here. Judge Reinhold is flat, but that's probably intentional, and David Krumholtz is so erratic it's hard to comment. It's very rare that I would ever say this, but the best performance is the child actor, Eric Lloyd. He was already a well-practiced actor by this point, and it shows. It's very well known by now that when a Disney movie introduces its own mythology, it won't be well thought out and will be full of holes. That's definitely the case here. As soon as you start thinking about how this world works, it stops being able to make any sense. It's best just not to think about it, and hope your kids won't either. Overall, a reasonable Christmas movie that has something that can be enjoyed by all the family, even if it is completely daft. This jingles in at 2 slippers. Thank you for watching. Please remember to leave your own presents in the form of a click on the like button, a comment about what Christmas movies you like, and also share with all your fellow elves, and of course subscribe for new reviews every Friday. I've been the Pyjama Critic, and remember, it's best to leave chocolate milk and a mince pie out for Santa. Being pulled over for being drunk in charge of a sleigh after 10 million glasses of sherry could really hamper his chances of delivering all the presents.
It's light, yet durable.
And you can wear the jumpsuit under your coat and pants.
But what do I do if I fall off a roof?